Hello and welcome to the Tonearm, where we connect you with the people and ideas moving culture forward. I'm your host, Lawrence Purrier. This week we're putting the Tonearm's needle on tenor saxophonist Azar Lawrence, a veteran of Elvin Jones and McCoy Tyner's bands, and a leader of his own group, the Azar Lawrence Experience, whose new album, Turn the Music Up, arrives September 25th. We talk about his unique relationship with Pharoah Sanders, dodging McCoy Tyner's broken piano strings, and how the 50 years between his first and latest recordings of his own songs trace his evolution as a musician. Stay tuned for Azar Lawrence. First of all, it's been a joy spending time with the record and having an excuse to go back into the catalog. I'm really curious about the decision to revisit some of your own songbook on the new record. The version of Summer Solstice is such a scorcher. I put them back to back, which I'm sure is not the most original idea. What I came away with was I heard 50 years of musical development. The two versions of the same song, they seem to reflect not only where you're at and where you were at, but everything in between, whether, a little bit more hard driving, a little bit more of the funk back in the music, certainly the rock influence.
Yeah.
What was going on there for you?
This album is supposed to answer some of the questions that we would get when we would sell CDs and stuff at a performance. And the first question that is asked usually is, are these the songs that we heard tonight? That's the music that we heard tonight. I wanted to answer that question. And so this is a compilation of material that we play. Now, I have another set of material, too, that we've added in my New Sky album. This is like pretty much the meat of what would be some of the regular material on this record. Just like a live album, we tried to make it as forthcoming as we could in terms of the solos, give people a taste of that. There's going to be another album that starts to explore the other side, the funky side of our thing. And my approach to music is whatever music I'm playing, I feel that rhythmically it all starts from an Afro rhythmic, even the Brazilian kind of thing, So I want to be authentic. Whatever type of music that we are playing and that we've incorporated into our show is authentic. When you hear a Brazilian rhythmic thing, you get to feel that that's the thing. The sambas are the sambas. They're not half samba. They're not almost a samba. They're, an actual samba. That's one of the thoughts that we explore musically. And then, of course, the jazz repertoire, wherever that's being heard, we didn't really swing on any of these. When you do hear a swing, it's the swing that has been experimented on and explored with the great Elvin Jones. And that's where I come out of. I lived 2.5 years with Elvin before I was with the McCoy 5 years. But then I went back with Elvin after a short period with Miles. It was a good period. We did the record live at Carnegie. I learned a lot from Miles maybe in a short time. Musically, we're trying to explore the authenticness of each particular genre that we exhibit.
Over your career, you've been in so many different contexts and so many different roles. And I'm really intrigued by your role in the Cookers. What I'm most interested in is how you show up as a band leader versus how you show up when you're kind of walking into an existing thing or somebody else's thing, or what do you have to suppress, or what do you have to do you have to say, oh man, I'm just here, I'm a hired hand, I got to keep my mouth shut, or what's that like as a player who clearly has his own musical ideas and vision?
Well, that's interesting you said that. George Cables and I have worked together back before any of my career started bearing fruit. There was a group with Woody Shaw, George Cables, Larry Gales, who was the bass player from Monk. Candy Finch was the drummer that had been 5 years with Dizzy Gillespie and myself, and we used to play after hours at a club called LB West on 54th Street. At the same time, I was working with the Watts 103rd Street Band and also with Eric Burden from The Animals as he started the group War. And so we did a recording. I don't know if you know a little bit about Los Angeles, but where the Guitar Center is located on Sunset used to be called Far Out Productions. And that's where Eric Burton, the producers and the management of Far Out Productions existed. And when I went to play there with Eric, when I got in there, I was surprised because it was a giant warehouse and there was a huge truck in there. Actually, that was the truck that was used to record Woodstock.
Mm.
And Eric owned that. And of course, that's what we used. It had video capabilities. And that's what we recorded. So that to say, George Cables and I had worked together before on a couple of occasions. I think George and then Eddie Henderson and I had performed together not only with Elvin, but on a couple of things with McCoy. Cecil McBee, several years ago, graced me with his presence. He was my favorite bass player for years and still my favorite bass player, one of my favorite bass players. But Cecil came and played with me at the North Sea Jazz Festival when I had my quintet there. Billy Hart played with McCoy with one of our bands, and we played together. He and Buster Williams for a number of years with McCoy.
Oh, wow.
As a matter of fact, David Weiss and I, he joined my group just for a couple of performances on the West Coast. Eddie Henderson, I stayed at his beautiful A-frame house in the Oakland Hills, and he came down and stayed at my parents' house on a couple of occasions. So it's family.
There's a few things you've touched on in the time we've already spent talking to each other that sort of dance around the theme of the lineage. And the Cookers, to me, really represent that. And then you're talking about playing with Woody Shaw. Like, these people and your interactions with them, that's the lineage of this music going back the better part of half a century or more now. And, going back to Monkey even longer. How aware are you of the lineage, your role in it? How do you think about it without getting caught up or self-conscious about it? How do you think about this music?
I don't observe it or think about it because I am it. You know what I'm saying? I don't think of it objectively because I am this. It has emerged from within my being. I've realized and accepted and participated in my own unfoldment in terms of it. Just starting back with my mother, who was a fabulous pianist herself, and she was a sixth grade teacher and stuff because coming from Oklahoma, her teacher told her if she wanted to pursue being a professional pianist, that he would fail her. So she was able to express a lot of that through me. My older brother was a great artist. We both played violin. He was 5 years older than me, and I was 5 years old when I played violin in the USC Junior Orchestra. When I first joined McCoy Tyner, there was a bigger impact than when I was with Elvin for some reason. And when we played at Vanguard, it was a line out the door. Billy told me, he said, yeah, man, a lot of these guys are musicians trying to see who it is that McCoy would skip over all these guys, great guys, waiting in line for the gig to pick somebody from the country. That's what they called me. That was my nickname for a minute. Los Angeles is a country town compared to the big city. So they were trying to say, who is this guy that they brought from the country and skipped over all of us? The beautiful part is he said, well, somebody's got to be your family out here. And so he said, I guess I'll take you on. And so that's how Billy Hart, and we've been friends for 50 years or more.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I'm a McCoy guy. Like, McCoy's important to me as an artist.
Mm-hmm.
Something that's intrigued me about him is that he never went electric. In that era when everybody else was experimenting with either electric instruments or electronics as a form of innovation, his innovation seemed to be more around arrangement, harmony, certainly rhythm. But I'm curious if you have any insight into that, if it was even something you would have talked about, or if you know anything about, like, what's the why behind that to the extent you know?
One time they didn't have a piano for him. All they had was electric piano. You can imagine the condition of that piano after we finished. What was left of it.
With that left hand.
Yeah, with the left hand on more than one occasion, but one comes to mind in Germany. We were playing a ballad during the time the Atlantis album had come out, and he and I were doing My One and Only Love as a duet. While he was playing his solo, he did one little run, boom, and when he hit the low notes, 3 strings busted. Just barely missed me. Just his touch was so that his tone, his touch, 3 bass strings popped, and I just got out of the way. I mean, I think he was doing enough. He's exploring the full value, of the acoustic piano instrument that had not been quite taken to that level. Before we go to electronics, now let's see who has explored the full value of acoustic instrument. And I think McCoy Tyner's name would have to be in terms of this particular genre, progressive jazz or whatever one would like to call it, this particular music that we're playing. We like to also refer to it as black classical music.
Yeah.
From that particular standpoint, I think he has explored it to its height before one would explore going to electronics.
Yeah.
He played with Ike and Tina Turner for a moment. Oh, he was a funketeer. He could get busy. And I had worked with the Walk on the Third Street Band in this little short time with Ike and Tina with the review. I own up to my funkness.
Yeah. You don't strike me as somebody that hides from the funk.
No, that's right. That's right. That's a good saying there.
Unlike a lot of other players in the jazz space, we acknowledge and talk pretty openly about your growing up with rock and your immersion in rock music.
Mm-hmm.
Growing up listening to the Beach Boys and being a surfer kid and all that, that's pretty far from the spiritual jazz scene. How does a kid into hanging out in Southern California, being into sun and fun, become the player you became?
Well, interesting enough, my mother used to practice every day when she would put me down as a nap. I remember hearing Beethoven, Bach, and all that kind of stuff when I was going to sleep and that young. And then, in fact, a few years ago, a friend of mine that I grew up with reminded me, she said, yeah, your mother used to say, no, he can't come out and play until he's practiced. He hadn't practiced it. I had to practice. Then, of course, it got me, and then I would practice. I feel funny if I don't practice. Billy Hart some years ago told me one time, yeah, you don't feel like a man unless you go if you practice. How can you go out in the world and you have a practice? That's true. I don't want to feel like that, less than a man.
Wow. Wow. To this day, you still practice?
Oh, absolutely. You can tell somebody that does the difference. Albert Daly, the great Albert Daly, graced me with his presence. We became friends. He was always telling me, he said, you can tell the difference between those that study. Those who have and those who have not studied, you can tell the difference. But certainly somebody that practices and doesn't practice. I've been on a quest trying to discover different approaches to long tones and techniques of filling up their instrument sonically. One of the people I was close with, had been close with, is Hubert. We were playing tennis, and he was telling me some of the techniques and stuff, but also in the conversations, it comes up that, everybody can't do long just mentally, or of course they can, but some people don't do them. They have other techniques that they use and they sound very good. But for me, I'm just an old school guy, and the traditional approach, for instance, is the long tone scales, chords, tonguing. I mean, all the different approaches to cover the capabilities of an individual expressing themselves through music and, of course, saxophone.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier you played violin when you were young. You were exposed to your mom playing piano. What is it about the saxophone for you? What was it about it when you first got it in your hands, and what's kept you engaged with it for a lifetime?
I was a singer also. I used to sing with my mother when I was in her class. Then we would do those performances at the school. I would sing and she would play piano and stuff. But as I got older, my voice dropped. I was also playing violin. And not only was I tired of hearing, he's a sissy, he got to, the little kids, how they taunt you. But my voice had changed and my hearing had changed. And so I was considering whether to go to viola. I knew I didn't want to go to cello because now I've already had to carry around a saxophone. Now I'm going to carry this big old thing. No, I didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
So I was in search of, and my father was very much the individual that would get something done. My mother was behind me musically. One of her kids is going to be a musician. My father was the one that would get something done. Moved up in Baldwin Hills before President Kennedy was assassinated. And Baldwin Hills, it was and still pretty elite at the time. You know, Ray Charles lived there, Nancy Wilson. My father's friend used to come by and lay out by our pool and bring his flute. And that was nice and stuff. But one day he came by and had brought an alto saxophone. And when he played that, I was like, oh, wait a minute, Daddy, that's it. That's what I'm looking for. That's the sound. He said, well, let's go get one. Later on, I found out that for the money we paid for that horn, we could have flown to New York, had a week of hotel paid, and we paid top dollar, So anyway, that's how I got the first instrument.
You started with a Selmer?
I did. I'll tell you, my father didn't play. He was like, what's the best? What do we got to get? Let's get the best one. And happened to have the right connections in terms of friends. And, I found out. Isn't that beautiful?
That's really beautiful.
Yeah, so whoever downplay my father's role in this.
Speaking of relationships, I'm curious about the friendship you developed with Pharoah Sanders, and of course, how you've come to include Creator Has a Master Plan on this new record. My impression just from reading about your relationship with Pharoah, it seems like it's kind of something different than just a musician revering another musician.
Oh, yeah.
I'm curious to hear from you, what that relationship was about and what it meant to you.
Interesting enough, I connected via Horace Tapscott, Pan-African People's Orchestra, and through them I met the Straughter brothers, Ray and Ernest Straughter. Also, I met a guy named Reggie Golson, Benny Golson's son, and all of these individuals were connected to Pharoah Sanders. Pharoah used to come when he would play at the Lighthouse. I ended up being in his company. This is way back. I mean, I was still playing alto saxophone. And so we shared a spiritual understanding, some of the more spiritual concepts, even dietary, vegetarianism, all these type of things, trying to prepare oneself to be receptive to the voice within you, your own spirituality, your own inner self, becoming acquainted with your own self, to know thyself. I used to come to a spiritual community that I lived at, we call it the Sun, because the numerical value of the numbers of the address worked out to be the number of the sun. Those of us were studying together at the Aquarian Spiritual Center under the direction of Dr. Alfred Lagon. So from that, all tied into the connection with Pharoah. So we had a long relationship due to the spiritual connection, like-mindedness, one mind, the God mind, all those type of concepts. And then, of course, when I got connected to Elvin Jones via Reggie Golson, who was my best friend, became my best friend. We used to jump the fence over at the high school.
Statute of limitations is well behind us.
Exactly. They can't come. Next thing you know, I'm on the road with Elvin, and I'm starting to bump into Pharoah. But we would go see him at the Concerts by the Sea, a lighthouse, any time he was in town, and talk. And he was fond of us, the Straughter brothers, myself, and of course Reggie. Everybody that was anybody knew Benny Golson's son. And Benny used to tell me that Reggie knew Duke Ellington better than he did. And because Reggie used to tell me that how he would go on the bus with Duke when they traveled and stuff. Pharoah and I became even closer over the years. And then, like I said, I'm on a quest what and how people are doing their long tones, their thoughts about that. And I was teaching at UCLA, and where I shared a lot of those information. Billy Harper gave me some information about that was quite helpful that he picked up from Ornette Coleman. All of those type of things played into the same kind of approach to Pharoah. Pharoah and I got very, very extremely close during the pandemic. I would go by, bring him some food. I called, hey man, what do you want something over there? Well, I'd like some Thai food today. I just so happen to know a nice Thai place. I go pick up some food, and during the pandemic, he went out his back door at night and stepped off of the step wrong and broke his hip. That's what happened. And of course, when you're up in age and break a bone like that, a hip bone, oh my gosh.
Yeah, the hip is often the decline, right? It's the start of the decline for a lot of older people.
Yeah, yeah. I would hear about him giving certain people mouthpieces and stuff, but he had tons of them. But he knew each one and what each one could accomplish. One day he said, man, well, wait a minute, I got something for you. Okay, he went upstairs. He came back down. And he had a gift bag with a ribbon on it and everything. And humbly, he gave me this mouthpiece. I was like, oh, thank you, Pharaoh.
Wow. Do you use it?
Well, I not all the time. For a long time, I wasn't able to manipulate it like I would like to because, playing as long as I have, it's not as easy as we think. It's starting to get it older.
Well, and the relationship with the mouthpiece, I mean, that's the connection in a very literal way. It's where the body and the breath and the instrument all come together.
Correct. Being a former skateboard expert, not only did I break my arm, but,
knocked out some teeth.
Yeah. Yeah, man.
Oh, my goodness.
So Pharaoh, in fact, I was with him the night before he passed away.
Oh, wow.
And I brought him some food, and I guess somebody else had. They were trying to get him to walk. I didn't feel good about the fact that he'd gone to Europe for that concert over there, but I guess he was in his condition. I thought that was a little rough. So they were walking him back and forth, walking him back and forth. They thought they were doing the best thing they could for him. And so he gave me a handshake and looked at me in the eyes, and it was like he was saying goodbye. And that night or early the next morning, he took flight.
That's incredible.
Isn't that something?
Tell me about Creator Has a Master Plan.
Oh, yeah.
It plays as tribute, not simply a cover. It seems beyond maybe even an interpretation. Hearing you talk about the spiritual relationship or the interests that you shared in personal development with him, that gives me now even a new reading on hearing the recording. But I wonder if you could tell me about your decision to include that on the record.
I think, like you said, it was not so much a cover. It was just, it boils down to a tribute. A medium for the expression of the love I had for Pharoah and our friendship, and just to be able to think that you can do that. I mean, play the song, man, behind Pharoah Sanders, to think that you can do it.
Yeah.
To have permission within your own self that you think you qualify to do it. But not only that, but I thought it was something that needed to be paid tribute to, the friendship of a great man, and that I've studied with him. Every question I asked, I was like, well, what was Train playing? And he was like, okay, we was doing this, that, he was playing this, that, and, he was exposing some good things.
It's really incredible to think that the lineage of guys that emerged in that post-Coltrane era, whether it was Liebman, obviously you, the people who were like right in the aftermath of the impact Train made, the fact that you had this sort of direct transmission through people like McCoy and Elvin and Pharoah, it strikes me as very powerful, not only musically, but I know that all musicians learn things from each other on and off the bandstand. I'm so intrigued by that element of your relationship with those people, like to be so almost close to the source. Mm-hmm. Just the impact Coltrane had on music and obviously on horn players and musicians and how they think. You got about as close to the source as you could get.
Yeah, I must admit that I did. And never heard it live. I never was. Closest I got was when I was with McCoy. We were at the top of the gate. And Elvin was at the Vanguard. And McCoy said, hey, man, it's Elvin's birthday. Let's run over to the Vanguard on a break. I said, okay. And we walked down the steps. He went straight to the piano, through the crowd, to the left side of the Vanguard. And I noticed that Jimmy Garrison, who I didn't know at that time yet, so he was at the bar and somebody else was sitting in on bass. This guy named Jazz Bo was playing saxophone. Elvin was playing. And so next thing you know, McCoy took his right hand and placed it on the piano, and the guy took his right hand off. And then next thing you know, McCoy was sitting down at the piano. Well, Jimmy sees that and goes up to the bandstand to get his bass back, and the guy was trying to hold on to it. Jimmy said, give me that bass. The next thing you know, the trio was playing. And they would play Softly as the Morning Sunrise. And to this day, I've never heard anything like that.
Oh, my God.
Oh, boy, it was... Next thing you know, you were in the Amazon forest. All of these visual things started popping just from hearing the music. Oh, man, it was... In fact, later on, I wrote a song on one of my albums, The Lost Tribes of Lemuria, which expressed some of the visual things. And by the way, my brother passed away in February. I was on the phone with his wife because I was out of town. I had told him when my mother passed away, I had an experience. I saw what I believe was the angel of death that came in, and the music that he brought with him through the window, his vibe was so high, it was music. He looked at me and his mouth opened, and I didn't hear anything. Then he went on through the wall into my mother's room. When I went in there, he was going through the wall toward the street. So my brother kept saying, turn the music up, turn the music up. And his wife was like, I'm telling him there's no music. And he keeps saying, turn the music up. And he passed away. Days later, after my mother's experience, and I couldn't hear, I had heard a big ankh, which is the key to life, according to the Egyptians. It's used in meditation. And I imagine, I guess, if I had heard that, I would have only heard it if it was my time.
Wow. So it wasn't meant for you at that point. You weren't meant to hear it.
I couldn't hear it. I didn't hear what he said. But the days later, I heard it.
Many years ago, I lost a brother as well, and he also died in February. February can be a dark month.
Yeah, that's true. I just always jokingly say, I mean, it can't be that bad. Everybody's doing it.
And everybody does do it.
Everybody does do it. So that's how Turn the Music came. Some of the artwork, my brother became the artist. He did my Bridge into the New Age album cover, and he did the Summer Solstice album cover. And some of the sketches from Turn the Music Up, he had done. And so we used some of those in there too.
That's beautiful. I'm curious about your role as an educator. You mentioned it earlier, and I wonder if there are some things, or maybe one thing in particular, that you strive to tell students, or something you want to impart on students that nobody could have told you when you were younger. Like maybe you couldn't hear it yet. And I wonder, is there something you try to pass on and you have to question whether the kids can hear it yet, whether they're ready to hear it?
Yeah, there's so much I'm trying to pass on that I didn't know, I wasn't ready to receive. I mean, I just really just scratching the surface. When I went back with McCoy, just with him, he had Jimmy Garrison was with him and Roland Prince. And Jimmy and I became friends. He took me to his apartment, showed me around, and they told me so much about Train and the experience with the chief. My basic connection with the music that I try to pass on is I learned how to be ready, because when we was on the road with Elvin, I mean, I have to practice, be ready. Now, we're traveling. A lot of times we didn't have a chance to practice. If you're in the group of McCoy Tyner and he solos first, and then here you come, people are liable. They're going to go to the concession stand when you come. And then, of course, if you solo first, if you ain't saying something, that's when they go get popcorn. You know what I'm saying? Better have something to say. I mean, a prolific soloist as McCoy Tyner, and everybody, no one, I'm sure, that was in that group that thought they were going to, talking about a country, and, that was,
Yeah, you have to have something to say.
Nobody thought 5.5 years I'd be, because McCoy at its peak of anybody, they're all there.
I mean, he had you and Bart's for a minute, right? Like, that's quite an arsenal.
Yeah, just for a very, very short time. But the majority of the time, it was a quartet. Then Guillermo Franco joined, and that's when it was a quintet.
Yeah.
And then when I left Joe Ford, then he went to the quintet. So it was a quartet for the majority of that time. So you got a solo after McCoy has. You read the same somewhere. People,
That's so funny.
wonder why they're getting up.
The first time I saw Pharoah perform live was at the Blue Note with McCoy's trio, and that was such a treat. I saw McCoy so many times over the years, but I was lucky to see Pharoah a few times. And the last time I saw him was here in Seattle, and it was a duo. It was him and William Henderson playing piano, and it was so beautiful, so delicate.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, really something else.
I knew William. Yeah, I kind of grew up knowing him. I mean, he was much older, but I knew William very well.
Yeah, really something. Well, I love the record, and I appreciate you spending time with me, and it's such a treat. You're someone I've wanted to talk to for a while, and I'm so glad we had the opportunity to.
Oh, thank you. Me too, brother. Thank you, man.
Thank you so much, Azar Lawrence, and thank you for tuning into the Tonearm. The Tonearm is executive produced and hosted by me, Lawrence Purrier. We're produced and marketed by Michael Donaldson. Editing and sound design is by Terry Grant, and our theme music is by Birdie, spelled B-U-R-D-Y. Thank you so much for listening. Be safe and stay in touch.
After listening to this episode, head to thetonearm.com, our online journal covering unexpected music and culture. Right now on the Tonearm, you'll find features on Jamie Livingston's Scottish folk drone project, Wild Gods, Mexican tape and bucla composer Concepcion Huerta, and so much more. That's thetonearm.com.